welcome to the Startup Grind.
So, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome our guest tonight, Dan Fishkin, the author, great human being, and CEO of Sparktoro. Come on up, man.
That's a crazy experience.
It is. You know, I don't know how long, I didn't look, but when you were here the last time, it was 4 years ago maybe? It was a while back.
Sounds right.
Yeah. That same thing happened, you know.
And I probably felt just
the same way, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you,
But Terry Crews was much less famous back then.
yeah, yes, exactly. Like, we wouldn't even have known who Terry Crews was. There wouldn't have been one hand raised.
I mean, I had heard.
So it's funny, the walking down the path, Glenn Cummin, the CEO of Redmond, he was here one evening and he was just dreading that.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just like, Mike, is there any way? I'm like, that's what we do. So he was just
It's funny because when I spoke at Redfin recently, he did something pretty similar. There was, in fact, a whole section of his team had made like these poster boards with my face on them. So that guy's a hypocrite.
He totally did. Because he was.
You give him a hard time about that.
He was not excited about that at all. So, well, thank you for being here. Thanks for taking part of your evening out, and thanks for just doing all the work you've done over the years. It's been, as you know, I'm a big fan of Brand Fishkin, and you've done some great things, and your point of view is awesome. So I really appreciate you being honest and transparent and unique in that way, because not everyone has the ability to do that. So, and for those of you who have not been again in the Startup Grind, we'll do a 40-minute-ish, 45-minute chat interview here, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So hold your questions to the end, unless you just have a burning question you need to ask, feel free to ask it. No, you're not going to interrupt me at all. And if you want to get up and have a drink, you're not going to interrupt me at all. We'll totally be fine. So again, just thanks for being here. And
Oh, my pleasure.
Taking some time out.
It's an honor. Like you, I love helping startups. I wish there had been more things like this, more people like all of you helping each other back when I was starting out. Because,
that's been helpful.
It's a lonely road. It's a lonely road.
Yeah. So can you give us the short version of the starting of Moz?
Yeah, sure.
Can you give us the short version, with your mom and kind of how that started?
Yeah, so I was basically in college at the University of Washington here in Seattle in 2001 and dropped out 2 classes away from graduating.
Did you ever go back to campus?
No. No way. The story's way better this way. Anyone who's in marketing knows story matters. The basic situation was I started doing web design for my mom's old school marketing agency. She was like making business cards and letterheads and logos and working with print shops to help local Seattle businesses. And I came aboard as web designer #1, and did that for a few years. We sank deeply into debt. It went very, very badly. We made every mistake you can possibly make. And then I started a website on the side called SEO Moz. And the reason I started that is because I was having to learn SEO. The reason being basically that we were unable to pay our SEO subcontractors. And you can occasionally find, sometimes I'll send a tweet and 1 or 2 of those SEO subcontractors will send an angry tweet in response. Because they are still pissed that we never paid them, which I think is fair. Maybe we did eventually, but it took years for us to make any money. So SEO Moz got started as a blog, and then it found some traction kind of in the second year of my blogging and writing. I got invited to a few events, and we scraped together the money to pay for them. I stayed at my grandparents' house and took a bus into New York to be able to go to this stuff. And then we started getting clients for that. And those clients, unlike the ones that we had for web design, they paid on time and in full. And we were able to dig ourselves out of that hole of debt. And in 2007, we launched a piece of software, or a collection of software tools, and that kind of took off because we built this audience of people who wanted SEO software, and there was almost no market for it. So even though those tools were very, very, very primitive at the time, it was great market timing, and we had the right audience. And so that helped us to gain traction. We raised around a venture at the end of that year. And I became the CEO and was the CEO for the next 7 years. And Moz basically grew from, what was that, maybe $400,000 in software revenue to about 30 million. And then I stepped down as CEO in 2014, promoted my longtime chief operating officer, Sarah Bird, who's still Moz's CEO today. I was there for 4 years as an individual contributor and left February 28th and started Sparktoro on March 1st because I wanted a few hours of vacation.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's long enough. Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk kind of about the interesting part of the raising money of Sparktoro, kind of the method behind that. It's super unique. I mean, this is, I've interviewed 120 people over the last 5-6 years, and this is the most unique way to raise money. But it also makes a ton of sense. So
yeah, so I'll
explain that.
Sure, I'll give you the broad philosophy behind it, which is I have a personal, I think, sort of mission to make it so that more kinds of people and more kinds of businesses can be successful in the startup world. So I think that it's largely bullshit that you need to fit the venture capital model of 4 to 6% of venture investments return the appropriate amount of capital or more to the fund, and the other 95% fail to do that. And thus, in those 95% of cases, founders, early employees, and people all around the business, including customers, don't benefit.
No.
Yeah, get very little benefit. And I think that model works fine if you are an investor. In fact, it can work very well if you're an investor, because the math works out. You make 100 investments, it doesn't matter if 95 of them fail, the 5 will make up for it. But I'm not an investor. I only get to put all my time and energy and love into one company every 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
I don't know how you did 6, but which is amazing.
Well, I failed a couple times, so that was easy.
Oh, great. Yeah, that helps.
Yeah.
Give you more. But I think that those statistics are not in our favor, right? And if you are a founder, it doesn't make sense to play that game. And I also believe that a ton of businesses that would be successful are forced into a path that causes premature death, that causes them to have to be a hare, not a tortoise. And if they were tortoises, they could have won. They could have waited for their market to take off. They could have stayed profitable, but maybe been smaller, but still plenty successful and made lots of money for their founders. And so what I wanted to do with the Sparktoro funding round is hopefully, I mean, dear God, hopefully Sparktoro goes well, right?
Sure.
But prove that there is another way that can make good money for investors and give a lot more flexibility and options to founders. And so the way the round is structured is that essentially Sparktoro is an LLC, not a C Corp, which is unusual. We raised $1.3 million from about 35 angel investors.
So let me ask a question about that. So the biggest check was what?
$102,000.
Small, round, even number. That's
Yeah.
nice. 102, and the smallest.
I think that was Dharmesh Shah, and he told me that if I let him take me out to dinner, he would explain why
It was 102.
it was 102. And so I'm waiting for that. I haven't gotten to do that yet.
And the smallest was what? 25?
Ooh, I think maybe there was someone at 15.
Okay, so
Yeah.
basically 15 to 100.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So across the board, right?
Yeah.
A fairly wide array, and those folks own units in the LLC, which is common in sort of like law firms, and it's actually very common in venture capital firms as well, right? Anytime you have a partnership organization, people own units in the LLC. And what this means a few things. This means that when the company is profitable, we have the option to pay our profits out in profit sharing. And basically we have a requirement similar to venture capital where we pay 1x our investors' amount. So let's say Mike, that you are our only investor and you put in 1.3 million.
Yep.
The first 1.3 million in profit that we decided to pay out, go right back to you.
Yep.
After that, everyone gets paid their percentage of the
Pro
profit.
rata.
Pro rata. Yep.
Okay.
So again, sort of similar to how you do venture, but you can potentially make that for 40 years, right? If Sparktoro is a long-running company, you can be
Getting
constantly, getting checks every year for a long, long time. And that means that the company does not have to sell or go public for you to be able to make money. And that means that Sparktoro could be a $2 million a year business that returns vastly more to its angel investors than most venture style investments, which is insane. Like when we spreadsheeted it out, we went, wait a minute, this can't be right. Now granted, you need a higher success rate to make this work.
Sure.
But I think that's built in. I think that if you have businesses that are designed to grow profitably rather than to burn capital as quickly as possible to either become the monopoly in their space or to die trying, you have a higher success rate. You will have something that looks more like the standard, U.S. Small Business Administration statistics, which are like 50% of businesses survive 5 years or longer, right?
4 years are gone. 40%. Within 5 years, 40% within 4 years, 50% of the companies are gone.
Okay, right, yeah. So, right, and I think with startups, your 4 or 5 year survival rate is like 14%.
Okay,
so you've dramatically reduced your odds once you take venture, but you've increased your odds of like becoming $1 billion.
Hockey stick, yeah, the hockey stick mentality, right?
So that's essentially the way the round works. I mean, there's
so those investors, Rand, those investors, the 35 people, can I just, if I'm one of the 35, can I exit out of that?
You can sell your units.
I can sell my units, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty liquid.
I mean, it's no less liquid than an investment in another private startup. Right?
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
Although, actually, I should clarify. It is more liquid because in a lot of those cases, the venture investors have
the rights,
some rights or some abilities to stop private sales or those kinds of things. There's also a bunch of weird stuff around 409A valuations and legal issues. So I guess you might say this has some more liquidity in it.
Yeah, it's just definitely easier.
Yeah, should be generally easier.
Absolutely easier. And so you have this different format, and the plan is you're going to make it work however you need to make it work.
Well, so
right? You don't have to hire. You don't have to hire. You don't have to spend your 1.3 in the next 12 months. You don't have
I think this is the most. So Chris Savage, who's one of our investors, he's the founder of Wistia, and he wrote about this on his blog a couple weeks ago, right? And his perspective was the reason I made this investment is because I don't think there's something wrong with the traditional angel and venture model. Like you can make money that way. A lot of people have. However, I think it's crazy to say this company that is just starting out today will either be a unicorn or nothing.
Yeah.
What if it's something in the middle that could do really well for its investors if the structure was right? And so Sparktoro might be, who knows, maybe Sparktoro will be, like Moz, maybe in a few years it'll be doing $50 or $75 million in revenue. Okay, well then the venture model could work, right? That's fine. But if it turns out that this market size is smaller, or we can't get traction, or the execution's not great, or a million reasons, right? Things go sideways. It doesn't need to be those things. I think that's the fundamental belief from a lot of the investors is, oh, this seems really smart to not force yourself so early to have this one and only one structure.
Yeah. Well, because every investor knows, as you and I know, you're wrong. Day one, you're wrong, guaranteed.
For sure. You don't know how.
No,
but you know you are.
But you know you are, right? So you know you're wrong. It's just like, okay, I just don't know what's wrong yet.
Yeah.
So give me some time to figure out what's wrong, and I'll make it right.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the very interesting points that this sort of flexibility triggers is that there's this idea that you can make money from a bunch of different kinds and sizes of companies, and that removes the bargaining power of future investors, right? Which I think is a good thing. I think we should all want to have the bargaining power in our own companies. I think that's actually really important. And I mean, this is more on the philosophical side, but like, I frankly do not have interest in building a monopoly. I don't think monopolies are good for the world or people or the United States or just any of us. So I don't have passion around wanting to build a monopoly, but if you are venture backed, you have to want to do that. I'm trying to remember, I was having a conversation with someone we were chatting about like, you want it, like you're analyzing market categories, right? And you're seeing that, a ton of the substantial chunk of the benefit of the profits, right, the margins in any category goes to the category winner. And very, very little comparatively little goes to player 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That sucks. That's dumb. Let's change that. Yeah. I think that concentration of wealth is a bad thing. I think that's one of the only things that Americans agree on, with like a very small number of billionaire exceptions, right? And so I think that's something that things like this can start to do. And this is hard right now. I'm not going to try and say, right, like, everyone should
do this.
Yeah. That's going to be a struggle. But if a few of us can do it, right, then that gets easier, right? That road becomes paved, that path becomes well trodden, and other people can take it. So
the fourth guy that does this is going to be easier than you guys.
So there have already been, I think, 2 or 3 others who've used our paperwork, because we open sourced our documents so that if you wanted to use it, you wouldn't have to like pay an attorney to go structure it the same way. We open source the docs and put them on Sparktoro, and a couple people have
already used that. Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Who else?
Who else is using
it? I don't remember their names. And I don't know if they have publicly talked about using them either. So that's
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, that's
burning question in that.
Yeah, just a question about your founder's shares in terms of the investment of the angels. Did you guys structure it in a way that you guys had a smaller portion in the beginning and increase it with the time with your efficient work, or you got bigger chunks and you just you did it the other way?
Yeah, so the way we did it, we talked about doing it a number of ways. The question, by the way, was how are our founders compensated, and how does that change over time? And that's a very fair question. So basically, Casey and I get a salary equal to up to the Seattle software engineer average, right? So sort of whatever level 1 software engineer makes at Microsoft, Amazon, etc. That is what we make until we pay our investors back 1.3, the 1.3 that they initially put in, at which point that goes up to 2 times the average. So I think right now that's around 150, and it would go up to as much as 300 that we could be paid in salary. And then once we pay our investors back the 1.3, everybody participates pro rata. So Casey and I own right around 75%.
Yes, you just had a value. It was just straight.
So we did a priced round, right? We didn't try and do a convertible note, or anything like that. Because similar to YC Safe, right? Like the way that Y Combinator structured their thing, the non-priced round thing did not make sense because we knew that we did not want to have someone price it in the future, right? So it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense. You had to do it.
Yeah.
You had to price it. Yeah. And so now you have this company, you have a little bit of money in the bank, and what's interesting to me is you can just be you two for a year.
We are planning on hiring nobody, working from home, spending as little of that 1.3 as we possibly can. Most of the expense is going to healthcare. I'm sorry. Healthcare in this country is insanely expensive for a 2-person company.
It is crazy.
It's unjustifiable.
Yeah, exactly. So you guys, I mean, you have no outside pressure saying you need to grow fast, or why don't you do this, or it just doesn't exist.
I mean, I think that the pressure is certainly there to prove that this works.
Absolutely.
But the pressure is not do it fast, it's do it right.
Yeah.
I like that a lot better.
Well, that's in defense, I think Seattle has a lot more of that mentality versus the Valley.
I have to tell you, so I had a call with an investor from Silicon Valley. It was my favorite call with an investor. I mean, he said no, right? But like the way he said no, the derision in his voice, just the you're the stupidest person I've ever talked to. This will never work. The round's not going to get done.
Yeah.
This company sounds like a great idea, but if you're serious, you need to raise, in the
Sequel.
traditional way.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, just that one person alone, I want to build this company and have it be a world beater just because of him.
Yeah.
Right? There's no better way to get a founder just like, oh, I'm going to make this work, than to tell me, you can't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what we haven't even talked about this. What the heck is Sparktoro?
Sure. Yeah. So
One minor thing.
So the fundamental idea that I encountered a lot with Moz was basically if there are not already a lot of people searching for what you do, right? So you make one of my favorite examples is to use CrowdCow here in Seattle. Did anybody?
CrowdCow.
People don't know what CrowdCow is? Lots of people. Okay, lots of people do. So apologies to our vegetarian audience members. CrowdCow is basically crowdsourcing a side of beef, right? So they work with small farmers, ranchers, all around the United States now, and a bunch in Japan, so you can order like A5 Wagyu and all that kind of stuff. And they will, get you very, very high quality beef that tastes dramatically different from the stuff that you could buy at a grocery store or even at most butcher shops. And then they freezer pack it and send it to your door. And it's an awesome business, and
killing
you
it.
try it. Yeah,
Totally killing it.
they're doing amazing because it's so good, right? But next to nobody searches for buy steak online. It just doesn't happen, right? Nobody goes on the internet and is like, I need a ribeye. No, we're sort of trained as Americans to think of beef as a commodity, and so this whole idea of like craft beef and beef can taste as different as whiskey or wine. I did not, or coffee, right? I didn't know that. And then when Ethan and Joe walked me through it, I was like, this is amazing. So I'm helping those guys out, and they sort of go, okay, what can we do on the SEO front? And I look at the keyword research and I say, nothing? You can do nothing with SEO. I mean, nothing that's going to move the needle for their business anyway, right? It's not...
Because there's no searches.
There's no searches, right? People don't think that way. Instead, what they have to do, and what we want to help with this Sparktoro, is go find their audience, the people who are likely to say, yeah, I think I'd be into trying craft beef and like ordering this and maybe sending it as a gift and subscribing, whatever. And then they have to find all the places, online and off, that audience pays attention to. So where do foodies who are into coffee and wine and whiskey and all these other things and willing to give, high quality, slightly expensive craft beef a try, where do they hang out? Who do they pay attention to? What do they listen to?
Yep.
That process is something I was helping their marketing team with last year, and it was a nightmare. And I had this idea in my head, like, okay, well, someone solved this. Let me go just find who's the software.
Tool? Who's the
yeah,
tool?
who's the tool? Where's the Moz for this, right? Like that's, of course, whatever.
Whatever it is, right?
Yeah. Like somebody's got to have this. No. There's old school PR databases like Cision, where you can say, this journalist writes about this topic. And then there's the closest you can get is a company called BuzzSumo, which recently sold to Brandwatch, which gives you like data on what content was socially shared and what network it was shared on. And some of the people who might have shared it on Twitter, but finding this was impossible. And so Casey and I got together and we were like, I think we can do this. Like, I think there's enough data to be able to do that. So the idea is you could plug in foodies or, steak eaters or whiskey drinkers or whatever it is, right? Chefs and you would then be able to see, here are the 17 podcasts that chefs on the West Coast of the United States listen to disproportionately more than anybody else.
Yeah.
Right? And here's the events they go to, and here's the people they follow on Twitter, and here's the...
That's where they hang out.
Yeah.
What do they do?
What do they do?
Yeah.
That's
Sparktoro.
will be Sparktoro. It's still 6 to 9 months away from a launch. But.
And I'm assuming you're going to do a fair amount of beta stuff, releasing to
Yeah, if you follow me on Twitter, I have already started sharing like wireframes and screenshots. Like, okay, what about this? Would you type this in?
Yeah, it's funny. I see stuff on LinkedIn. I'm like, wow, that's early.
Yeah,
that's early.
It's just little gray lines that I drew in Photoshop.
There's a wireframe.
Yeah.
It's a wireframe. And so the Sparktoro plan is 6 to 9 months, maybe 12 months max. You're gonna have a product on the street that's maybe embedded, maybe it's in real life. Let's look out 12 months. Let's say that product exists. Let's say that you have customers. Let's say you're generating revenue. What to Rand is the next step for that?
I mean, I think obviously eventually we would hire some employees,
well, sure.
And start growing the team. And I think that two things are very salient in my mind from my Moz experience. I think one is I am not willing to launch early with a sort of crappy product that barely solves the problem. So I strongly dislike let me say that again.
MVP, kind of like MVP -1?
Yeah, so I really dislike MVPs if you know in advance that lots of people are going to pay attention to your launch. I think MVPs are awesome if you think very few people are going to pay attention to your launch and you're going to have to show every person that MVP. Then an MVP makes awesome sense, right? Get something out there as early as possible, start showing it to people, learn from them. But instead with Sparktoro, right, because I know that we have a huge audience because of what I did at Moz, right? And people are paying attention to me, that on launch day, tens of thousands of marketers will come, they will look, and they will judge.
Yes.
And they will judge harshly. And I want them to, I expect them to, and I better be ready for that, right? And I think this is one of the problems that the MVP experiences is that it is, Eric Ries, when he wrote The Lean Startup, when he talked about the MVP, was not talking about, oh, you're going to launch to thousands of people who are then going to forever remember only the first impression. No, he was talking about, you are a new startup, you'll be lucky if you can get 5 people to look at your product.
Yeah.
And then it makes perfect sense. So that is kind of the plan there. And I think that in a year from now, we are going to be almost certainly doing a lot of iteration based on feedback, but hopefully people like the product enough at launch that we didn't launch too early.
Yeah. Well, you like you say, you have some experience behind you that's going to drive some of those decisions.
I mean, but it's so weird for me to say that because my whole startup life, all I've heard is, if you're not embarrassed by the first version, you launch too late. And that is a dirty lie. That is I don't know who tells us that lie, but it is.
Isn't that Brad Feld that says that?
So I think that he is more balanced among venture investors on that side. But certainly, I mean, your Paul Grahams and your Andrew Chens and these very visible people in the startup community are amplifying absolutely the opposite message. And I kind of get it, right? If only 5% of the companies in your portfolio need to make it, and you need your returns in 5 to 7 years, because that's what you promised your LPs, speed to market and being the dominant first mover monopoly matters more than getting it right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you're a founder, if you're an entrepreneur who's building, I don't want to say a real business, but a more traditional kind of business, one where you care about your profits and losses, then I think it's a bad move.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I mean, you have. My belief on the MVP is you need to get it out as soon as you can. But like you say, 100 people is fine.
Plenty.
That's feedback. Not 1,000, because 100 people is great. You get quick feedback, and you can iterate and move on to the next version, right? And I've obviously read this and lots of stuff that you've written, and so I know the answer when I ask the question, but I just like to hear it.
I could have changed my mind. You never know.
Yeah, you could. You have a chip on your shoulder.
Oh, is it really visible?
Yeah, exactly. So I just think it's interesting that you explain that, because I think more people have it and don't tell the story. right? We've sat and talked before,
Yeah.
and I've always appreciated the fact that you just say, well, this is how I feel, and fuck it if you don't like it. So, tell us about the chip on the shoulder, and we know you left Moz, we know, it's gotta be hard. It's your company, you started it, you and your mom, so we know that can't be an easy process. You don't have to tell me details, but sure it wasn't easy. So, where's the chip? I mean,
Sure.
explain that.
Yeah.
Maybe you should say, I don't know how far you want to go, but the exit of Moz and
sure.
how
No,
harder,
no.
maybe harder or easy.
Yeah. So I wrote a blog post about this, and I think that the sentence that seemed to reverberate for a lot of people was, on a scale of 0 to 10,
Yes.
where 0 is escorted out of the building by security, and 10 is, you hug everybody, and it's sort of tearful but joyful goodbyes, and, you're all great friends, and you walk out. I was like a 4. So not like right in the middle, but just a little to the negative side of that. And there was no security. I carried my own stuff out.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
But yeah, it was it was, to your point, a very painful departure. It was, I would say, like mostly my decision, but maybe if I hadn't made that decision, it wouldn't have been my decision.
But it still would have happened.
Right, but it still would have happened. So that, I think that's the right way to frame that. And it is certainly the case that I, had substantive disagreement with leadership and management about, all sorts of things, inside the company. And I think that there was a general sense of, after I stepped down as CEO, I got this might be me projecting a little bit, but I don't think too much of, okay, the challenges that we're experiencing, right? Because so for 7 years, Moz grew at 100% year over year, sort of growth rate, right? Which is quite great.
Yeah.
And then that plateaued, I think, to 50%, and then 20%. The last couple of years have been 11%, something like that, 12%. I think maybe this year will be 9 or 10%.
Yeah.
Right. So, which is fine. If it were Sparktoro, that would be awesome. It would be fantastic, right? It would be a dream come true. But because it's venture backed, that's sort of an unacceptably low growth rate, even though it's now profitable growth rate after a number of years of burning money. And I think that there was this attitude after I stepped down that okay, Rand's mistakes are what got us to this plateauing growth rate. And so in order to recover, we need to not listen to him.
Yeah.
As opposed to okay, maybe this idea that he had was bad. It was almost like the source of the idea is the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely that'll build up a chip pretty fast.
Yeah.
I think for anyone, right?
Yeah, I think. What did your mom think?
Oh yeah, interesting. So I don't think I've ever phrased it this way before publicly, so maybe don't tweet it. But in 2012, I basically went to my mom and I said,
I interviewed you a month after that.
Oh wow, yeah.
That's why I remember it so clearly, because it was so fresh in your mind.
Yeah, and painful too, right? Because it's not just your partner in the business. It's
to be your mom.
This is also your mom, right? So I didn't technically fire my mom, but for all intents and purposes, I think the 4 out of 10 that I said, she could fairly say 3 or 4 out of 10 also, and that sucked, right? That sucked for her, and so I think that there's almost this sense that I have of oh shit, this is karma. This is sort of what you are reaping what you sow, and you I don't know, not necessarily deserve this, but you shouldn't be that surprised.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And when do you think you're going to get through that?
actually kind of feel like I am through it. I think that a big part of the reason that I wrote Lost and Founder and that I write these blog posts and that I'm so, that I am the way I am is because that's like a way, at least for me, of achieving catharsis, right? So for some people, catharsis is they yell and scream and burn photos of the people who have wronged them, right? My lovely wife is not here tonight, but she would know what I'm talking about. And then there's like people who bring it up to their therapist and they go through it that way. There's people who process in all sorts of different ways. For me, a huge part of processing and being able to take something off my chest is write about it. Yeah, write about it and hopefully help it, especially when other people email me and say, I have also been through that. And thank you for writing this because now I don't feel alone.
Sure.
I think that's the biggest thing for me. So, Lost and Founder, like I don't know, maybe my publisher is like mediocre happy with sales. Like it did okay, but it wasn't a bestseller. At least not New York Times. I think it was like something else. But the point for me was not that, right?
Yeah, the point for you was to release the demons.
Well, and to be able to hear from people like, oh, this actually helped me.
Yeah.
Like, I also went through that. I don't feel as alone, right? Especially chapters like the one on depression and the one on sort of.
Well, that's the stuff no one writes about. At least in our world. I mean, the startup world, everything's so rosy.
I mean, and venture, right? I think that to be totally honest, if I had come out of Moz and had sort of not overshared in the ways that I have,
sure.
I would have had a very easy time raising a large venture round at a great, multiple and all that kind of stuff. I think if I were trying to raise venture, no fucking way, right? A lot of people would be like, did you just crap all over our business and all of us for like years? No, we're not giving you money.
Yes. Yeah, it would be challenging, but you'd probably get some take.
You probably would. I mean, there's so much money slushing around in there.
You get some take.
And I do think, I also think I understand. I have some empathy for why those investors, professional investors, are so biased to multiple founders, founders who've been through it a few times.
Well, yeah, think of what you know now versus you did 8 years ago. That's dramatically different. So tell us, who's written a book in here? Has who written a book? Got a couple in the back written a book. It's really hard. My wife wrote a book. It's flipping hard, man. It's a long process. How long did it take you to write this thing? 2 weeks?
Oh, no. Let's see. So I pitched publishers in New York in January of 2016. And then I basically submitted a few chapters, not quite half the book, maybe a third of the book to the editor that I went with, from Penguin Random House in June
16? June 16?
So, maybe I had written for 4 or 5 months, and then she was like, nope, this is not the right book. And so we threw the whole thing out, and I started again, and I finished December 31st at 10:30 p.m.
I'm 17.
Yeah, because I owed it, it was
yes,
due.
how do we do that?
It was due that day.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing like a deadline.
Exactly. And who came up with the name?
Geraldine, of course.
Really?
Yeah. Geraldine was my wife.
Yeah. That's such a great name.
I mean, there are a lot of things that I love about her, but her voice is strong in here too.
Yeah.
Right? If you read something in the book and you find yourself chuckling or laughing out loud, that is almost definitely Geraldine. I remember at one point my editor Nikki saying to me like, I love these parts of these chapters where you've like, you've explained something well, but you've also made it really humorous. And I was like, oh yeah, I can totally do more of that. That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's great. That is totally awesome. And where does this help run a better company?
Oh, I mean, I think that I've found, I'm sure many people find this, I don't know if it's true for everyone, but I think that for many folks, you you learn vastly more about a topic when you have to teach it to someone else.
Absolutely.
Right. So there was this piece in the New York Times. I think it was last week, just in the last few days, and it was really great. I think that the title was "Those Who Can Rarely Teach." Right. Playing off the old adage, which is provably false, that those who can do and those who can't teach. Right. And that, of course, I think has been largely soundly rejected, which is good. But also this other data that essentially, if you're really good at doing something, you don't necessarily internalize why you're good at it or why it worked. And I think that writing about something in a way that's accessible to many other people is a way to internalize that lesson and to truly extract out the why of what happened. If you can do that well, I think that you can learn yourself.
But you've always been a good writer.
Oh no.
Well, I mean, in the last 8 years.
Okay, yeah, sure, but but I mean, there were those first many years where I don't know if anyone here has ever done this, but you can go back to the Moz blog. You can go all the way back to the 2003 SEO Moz blog posts, and you can be like, this guy's an idiot, right? Just the topics are boring, the headlines are crap.
Sure.
The writing is stilted and error-riddle and all the things that you'd expect. And then, of course, right, by year 2 it gets better, and year 3 it's better, and yeah, in the last, since 2010 it's been decent, right?
Quite good. That's quite good, yeah. Do you have more confidence now in Rand's skills after writing and after learning than you did before you wrote the book?
I have high confidence that I will make new mistakes.
But not the same.
But not the same ones. And frankly, I think
that's good though.
That's an exciting place to be in, right? I think it is good to know which things you hate so much that you don't want to ever do them again, and you're sort of like, well, I'm excited to figure out what the problems are on the other side of that.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, if you feel like you're not going to make those same mistakes, we're all going to make different ones, but hopefully this last time. Feel free to ask questions, guys, if you have questions. I'll grab questions. What gets you up in the morning today, and is it any different than it was, say, 10 years ago when you were at Moz?
Oh, God, yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's a totally different set of things that gets me up. I mean, my general driving force is much less I want to make me and my investors a ton of money. Don't get me wrong, though that's an also nice thing to have, but far more is things like, I want to prove that a different kind of model can work. I want to help different kinds of people get into and succeed in the startup and entrepreneurial worlds. I want to, make the world that we live in more equitable and fair. Those are things that get me out of bed vastly more so. I don't think 10 years ago, was that 2008? I mean, I don't mean to use the purely political version of this, but I think like 10 years ago I was sleeping, and in the last 10 years I have become more, like as the kids say, woke around a bunch of issues, right? Sure. In our professional world, and in sort of like the world of investment, and in startups, and in politics, and in sort of like gender diversity issues and racial diversity issues and all these kinds of things, right? That I think 10 years ago I didn't think about at all.
Well, very few of us did.
I mean, which is embarrassing, which is super embarrassing, but now we get to make up for it. Hopefully, I hope so.
Absolutely, not a problem. Go ahead.
I have a question. For our business, we noticed mid-summer last year that traditional methods were not working. So, for example, Facebook ads or keywords on Google AdWords, and we saw fellow companies just funneling tons of money down that avenue. We stopped, and we started looking at new avenues. So, for example, non-rectangular phones for non-rectangular people, and so we're a non-rectangular company, so we kind of think outside of the box for our marketing as well. So we were thinking of the chalk on the sidewalk and sides of buses and radio advertising. Is there anybody that writes about those kind of alternative marketing schemes?
There are a few, but they are few and far between because unfortunately there's not a lot of demand, right? The demand in the I want to learn about web marketing space is highly concentrated in search and social and advertising, with some reasonable ones in sort of conversion rate optimization and email marketing, a few others. But I mean that you make a great point, which is true for almost every startup that I have advised or worked with or helped. I'm sure many of you have too, Mike, which is the traditional method is you get money, you pour it into Google and Facebook, and because everyone else is pouring it into Google and Facebook, the ROI is very low because the cost is nearly what anyone could make off of it, right? So the margin tends to be really thin, and since a lot of companies, especially companies that are backed by venture dollars, are willing to sacrifice profitable growth for raw growth, you see that in many hot sectors, it's even more overrun. And this is becoming true not just in search and social advertising, but lots of other forms of marketing as well. And so I think that to your point, it pays so heavily to go and try and find out oh, my audience maybe is paying attention here also, and I can reach here even though no one else in my competitive group is. That can be absolutely huge. I hope to be able to write more about that on Sparktoro, because obviously that's what we're going to try and help with, but there's not a lot of creative, guerrilla-style advertising blogs.
Because it's so flooded right now.
Yeah.
And we even contacted agencies that do college ambassadors.
Oh, sure, yeah.
They put flyers on the back of bathroom doors, and they reach out to their friends, and
Seattle Interactive Conference does a ton of that guerrilla-style marketing here, and that's actually how if you talk to Brian Rauschenbach, I don't know if you've ever interviewed him, but
I don't.
Yeah, so he has done some crazy creative advertising to get SIC to be this sort of big interactive conference here, and a lot of that is the postering projects that go up around Capitol Hill, and creating demand by being in the places where the audience is. So yeah.
Great. Where do you see unused, undeveloped advertising channels? Where do you? Where's some?
So I think the biggest one right now is probably in podcasting because there's no good marketplace for it. 22% of Americans listen to multiple podcasts in the last month, but something under 5% of podcasts have advertising.
How many people listen to a podcast in the last 30 days? Holy shit! Everybody.
Yeah, it's
okay. This is this market. Yeah.
I mean, this is our market, right? But
sure.
It's insane how popular they are, and it's insane how unmonetizable they are for their creators, because there's no standardized platform, and there's no bidding marketplace, and nobody's playing it. Google is trying to get into it, right? And they've announced some stuff there, but yes, I think that's probably the most untapped one. Another one that's actually pretty big is events. You guys are here, right? And you're sponsoring this, and I hope that this brings you really good leads, but it's pretty weird that you're alone here. Right? And I think that's very strange because here is a room of highly capable people who need all sorts of goods and services, and why are we all here, right? We're here to try and make our businesses do better. So that's another big one.
Yeah. That is interesting because that's such old school, right?
Well, podcast is newer school.
But that's just super old school.
So, two questions. Can I get a pilot or beta for Sparktoro?
I so want to say yes to that. As soon as I have something, I promise I'll post about it, and then yes, I will. I would love some beta testers, absolutely.
And then two, you're testing this new investment vehicle per se. What's the most often asked question from investors?
Yeah, what did I get most often? I think Probably the biggest hurdle to overcome for a lot of folks was why is this model going to have a higher percentage of survivability and success rate than venture? Because it has to have a much higher percentage to be able to make sense, right? So
what's your argument there?
my argument is that I think that way too many companies, when they raise their $1.3 million round, right? Their whatever they're calling them now. Do they call those pre-seed rounds now? No, seed. Okay.
Still seed.
All right. It's except in San Francisco where it's a pre-seed. This way. Hasn't gotten that bad yet. But when you raise your 1.3 million, the first thing you do is, all right, we need to hire 3 or 4 really talented, very high-cost engineers. We need very expensive office space. We've got to have competitive benefits, right? Because we need to go fast. Speed is of the essence, and so therefore you immediately start looking at your burn rate and how many months of runway you have. And my response to my investors was, we are not going to have to worry about runway for years because we are spending so little money, and our goal is to get to profitability. And I think I could also credibly say, like, look, I have this superpower, which is tons of people in the web marketing field already pay attention to me, which means that I can send a tweet and probably get my first 50 to 100 customers, which is a cheating, like that's totally cheating.
But it's a great cheat.
It's a good cheat, but I don't think that someone else would be able to use that as their this is why you should invest in this model. But I do think everyone could look at it and say, most companies should be the tortoise, not the hare. And this model will give you a much greater success rate. What we don't know is what that is. Until there's a few hundred, maybe a couple thousand investments like this, we don't know what those numbers are, right? And so you're taking a risk, just like you would with a lot of types of investments. I hope that's compelling. Obviously, it's compelling enough for my particular investors, but I think there's a hand all the way.
All the way to the back, last row. Row?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, hey.
So I was just curious, because you're reinventing the done better than perfect model. Done and perfect are two sides of the spectrum. So how do you decide when is the right time to launch a product? Who is your user? Who are you testing with?
Yeah, so basically right now our thesis is about half of our customers, somewhere around half of our customers will be consultants and agency marketers, and the other half will be in-house marketers and entrepreneurs and people who do marketing, even if it's not technically in their title at their job. And so those are the groups that we have, a bunch of people in our personal network where we're like, hey, great, and then, of course, I come to events and people are like, I want to beta test, which is awesome, thank you. And the idea there is we want to show the alpha version, the beta version to those kinds of people until we get to the point when they say, I can't live without this. Like, I need this, can I please show this to so-and-so, hey, I want to share this, like I'm using it in my regular marketing. We see them talking about it publicly where they go, oh, well, if you can get into the Sparktoro beta, you can do this cool thing. That's when we feel like we'll be ready to launch. Like once our audience is very, very excited and clearly actually using it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Abhishek?
Hi, thanks for coming out today and giving us your time. My question, follow-up question to his question is as you have a burn rate of for a longer time period, why didn't the investors ask that why don't you raise a smaller amount for a shorter time?
Yeah.
Well, the question is, since you have a low burn rate, why didn't you just raise less money and still raise money down the road?
I think we did have maybe 1 or 2 folks ask, why raise this particular amount? Yep. And the answer was because I don't want to spend another day thinking about fundraising for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years.
Everybody hates it.
Yeah, it's a terrible way to have to think, right? And I think it forces you to have to optimize your business not for customers, but for investors, which if you're trying to build a profitable long-term company is dumb. It's just a bad thing to optimize for. I mean, I think it's generally unhealthy, and even a lot of investors will say, don't optimize to get me interested, optimize to get your customers interested. But what do we all do, right? Because we have to, Like, I spent years at Moz optimizing Moz's business for what I heard was the reasons Valley investors turned me down in 2009, and 2010, and 2011. And those were bad moves. Those were bad moves for the core of the company. Things like getting rid of services entirely, so that we had 0 services revenue at all. And then, of course, what happened 5 years later? Oh, now the new trend is a blended software and services model. You sons of bitches. Like, God damn it. Why? Why did I listen to you, right? So that I think is the biggest reason. And that actually got folks over the hurdle really fast. I think that was easy to do. I think the other thing that helped on that front was that the round size didn't feel unreasonable, right? I think if I had said 3 million, a lot more people would have been like, whoa, wait a minute.
You don't need that much money.
Yeah. Right. But 1.3 being sort of a round size that many folks were familiar with in the seed stage felt comfortable. Yeah.
So I have 2 questions which are related to Moz. So where do you think that the Google is moving towards in terms of the SEO, like the model to promote the web, like for websites to promote themselves higher in the search? And do you think that is also the reason why Moz is going down in revenue? Because Google is making all the changes.
Sure. So first off, let me be clear. Moz is going up in revenue, just not very fast.
Yeah.
And second, the field of SEO software has never grown faster. So Moz basically lost out to 2 big competitors, SEMrush and Ahrefs, because we took our eye off the SEO ball and tried to go broader and be something
Other than SEO.
Something other than SEO. Why did you do that, Rand? Well, we might have heard that diversifying and growing your business and trying to be like a big, wide category leader was better than, anyway, blah, blah, blah. But I will say that I think that the changes, every time Google changes more, and especially with the recent changes, I actually think SEO software is in a great position to benefit, because I think that what Google is changing right now is they are making it harder and harder to rank in the normal, organic, web style results. There's fewer of those. They're answering more and more queries on the page.
Right there?
Yeah, right in the results. So, yeah, on your phone. Like I think right now, across all Google searches, according to clickstream data I got from JumpShot in February, 49% of all searches result in 0 clicks. 0 clicks.
The answer is right.
The answer is right there, which means the only way to see how things are going for your business is to track your rankings. You need someone's software to crawl and update you regularly about, like, here's where you are, here's what it says, here's what your competition says, here's where they show up in all these different kinds of weird results now that are popping in there. So I think that actually SEMrush, Ahrefs, Moz, they're all poised to do really well, assuming they can execute on that. As an entrepreneur or a marketer, that sucks. Like, it is awful, right? Because for the first time ever, we're seeing plateauing and I think actually declining number of clicks that Google is sending out to the web. And the deal between search engines and web publishers was, yes, you can crawl my content, use my bandwidth for free, steal all my stuff, I won't sue you for trademark violation, there's no copyright issues, but anytime I appear in your results, you send me traffic. And like Lando Calrissian, this deal's getting worse all the time. Like, it is no fun out there to be a marketer who relies on organic Google traffic. And so I think we have to diversify. Like, all of us have to diversify.
So you've talked about why this model is better for entrepreneurs in particular, but you've also acknowledged that, like, especially in your call with that Bay Area investor, that venture investors are sitting pretty right now, and they don't have a lot of incentive to explore this new model. But are there some investors out there who are amenable to this? Who are they?
Yeah, so I think that the right types of people are angel investors, especially those who have been founders.
Operators.
Operators,
Yeah.
exactly. And the reason for that is twofold. One, because a lot of them had invested money into many venture-backed startups and had high failure rates and been frustrated by that. And they also, I think a lot of them hate the fact that they can be in a company for 7, 10, 15 years and not know whether it was a winner or a loser. And that sucks for a lot of those investors. They want to know, like, in year 3, if I start getting checks, oh, this is working. Like, all right, some of my money's coming back to me. And, you know, maybe I have $3 or $4 million that I can afford. I want to go ahead and put $400,000 towards, you know, 6 or 8 startups, 50K each. Okay, I can't place enough bets for the venture model to pay out for me, but if there's something that gives me, you know, 20% of the companies, or 30%, or, you know, oh my God, 50% of the companies survive 5 years, that could be huge.
Especially if you're getting money back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the
Because
other
even
thing.
if you don't get all of it back, let's just say 4 years down the road, all of a sudden something bad happens and you die, but you've got maybe 3 years worth of money back.
Right. I mean, in a lot of cases, many of these types of angel investors are very happy saying, I want to support the startup ecosystem, and if I can make 1 to 2x my money, that's okay by me. I view this more as like giving back to a community that gave to me than am I beating the S&P 500 index fund? Right? And I think that's actually a really reasonable way to think. All of us who benefit from a community, most of us who benefit from a community, Jeff Bezos, want to get back to it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Not gonna name names.
For some people not smiling, sorry about that. No offense.
Go ahead.
So, trying to switch gears, I know with the promotion and the out, promoting Sparktoro, you have some of these free tools that you're promoting.
Right, yeah.
And the interesting thing for me, so I'm in advertising, is that with these, it's, the laws and some of these other free tools, it's like, oh, this is free, just give us your info, here's the email address, getting that lead information, but like the Spark score leads, there's no
email
there's
capture.
no game.
What is my game? What are you trying to do right now?
So, I know this like long term, but I wanted to like, what is like the strategy there?
Yeah.
What's your purpose for that?
I agree with that. So the question is, most has a lead capture, you capture email and you get something for free. Leads or brand's like, yeah, no, I don't want anything. Here, just take it.
So you do have to give us one thing, which is you have to connect your Twitter account, right? For us to be able to analyze it and give you sort of the free data. I think there's another free tool coming in the next few weeks.
You think? Just think. You just might not.
It depends on what. It mostly depends on what Casey wants to work on for the next 4 or 5 weeks. And we'll see. He gets passionate about something and he's like, I want to do this. Okay. So in this in this model, the idea is yes, we don't get an email address, but that is okay with us. We're trying to do 2 things. One is sort of broad spectrum marketing, like awareness, like hey, Sparktoro exists, and also Sparktoro is able to identify people who are actually influential on Twitter versus people who just have high follower counts. And those 2 things are different things. And creating that like brand impression in your mind that, oh, followers does not equal high quality engagement is something that we're trying to see because A, we believe it to be true. I think everyone believes it to be true. But B, because that's a problem we want to solve long term by helping people find who is truly engaging with their particular community, not just Twitter, but all these things. And then the second thing is Twitter's API is very expensive, and we would like to make many calls to it. And so having OAuth connections means that we can make a lot of those calls without paying Twitter a ton of money early on. So it's almost like it's like we don't want to spend our money, we're very frugal, we want it to last a long time. So this is a way for us to provide some value to people for free and get this marketing message out there, and then also be able to make queries against Twitter without being charged an arm and a leg.
Thank you.
Please.
What are your thoughts on Instagram marketing?
What are your thoughts on Instagram marketing?
Yes, and also
And who's the best teacher of Instagram? That's a good question.
Yes, so to be honest, I don't have a great answer to the second one, but when I find those people, I will amplify them absolutely. I have seen some good stuff out there. Yeah, I bet there's a few people who probably know. Yes.
Subi.
Subi.
Subi Zimmerman is really good.
Subi Zimmerman. Okay.
Personally.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, in the back you had an answer as well?
No, I just said I can help with Instagram.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go. There's a
That's
a gentleman in the back row. Yeah, we can chat. So one thing I will say. Oh, and I'm sorry. Were you also Instagram? No. Okay, something else.
I am not Subi Zimmerman, by the way.
Okay.
She's not. That's Marta. I know her name.
So Instagram, I will say, is one area where with Sparktoro we are not touching on very heavily, and this is primarily because our sense was like, okay, go back in time 7 years ago, and the phrase influencer marketing meant go out and find all the sources of influence that reach your customer, and then go do your marketing on them, podcasts and events and media and all these kinds of things. And now influencer marketing means go pay half-naked people on Instagram to pose with your product. And that is not something that I'm particularly passionate about or interested in, and I think that there's a ton of companies playing that game and in that particular market, and so we're kind of leaning against it. That being said, I have seen Instagram advertising be extraordinarily effective for new companies in a category, right? So like
New companies in a new category or new companies in a category?
Sorry, how about this? People who are advertising in a category where there are few other advertisers on Instagram.
Okay.
So if you are an early adopter of Instagram advertising and you do a good job in, tabletop games or whatever, women's swimwear, obviously that is not a category that is empty right now. But, I'm trying to remember, I met a woman from Tomboy X, which is here in Seattle. Yeah. And she was saying that Instagram advertising has been extraordinary for them because their product is, very visual, but then it is like many other consumer products on Instagram in that it's they make boy shorts, boxer brief style boy shorts for women and a bunch of other clothing and also men. But they appeal to a very GLBTQ plus friendly audience and a very kind of alternative.
And their audience is fairly niche-y, right?
Yeah, and so they have had awesome success finding the right accounts that those people follow on Instagram and then doing targeted stuff. So I think it can be effective as long as the sector isn't overrun.
One more question. I guess I'll take two.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. If you have 35 investors, how do you contain them? How do you keep them at bay to make your daily decisions?
Yes.
So the question is how do you keep the 35 investors happy or at bay or whatever, so they don't bug you?
So this is the wonderful, wonderful thing about raising from busy entrepreneurs. I have heard from 0 of them since closing the round, except to get congratulations that the round is closed and it was announced. They just literally, they are there when I email them and say, hey, I'd like some help with this or those kinds of things, but otherwise totally hands off. I will say I think I'm extremely privileged because a lot of these people are people that half of them are people I've known, many of them are people who are new to me as well in this round, but because they're professional investors or they make many investments and because they are very busy in their lives, not hearing from me from 4 years except getting a check is awesome to them, right? That's their dream come true. They think that's wonderful.
I love that.
And when I found people during the raise, who were not like that, I did not call them back, right? So I think that was also a self-bias. There were a few people who were very active and sort of how are you going to do this, and okay, all right, I think maybe back off on that gas pedal.
Forget about that guy. Okay.
So my question is, I'm wondering for Sparktoro, there's all sorts of businesses that would want to
Yeah, so the basic story there is I always biased starting with organic, with brand, and with content, because advertising, once people have already come to know you, like you, and trust you, gets way higher ROI. I think that one of the biggest mistakes that startups make, and many companies make, is that they invest in advertising vastly too.
Yeah, no one knows who they are.
Yeah, right. So if you've
Super
never,
expensive.
yeah, if you've never heard of Tomboy X, it's not going to be nearly as effective as if you've already heard of them and been to their website once, and now they're retargeting you. Same with CrowdCow or Sparktoro or anybody else. And so I think this is the power of targeting people who are already in your crowd, which is why building that crowd, essentially website visits and email addresses are the bread and butter.
Mike, can you make an exception, please?
Last one.
Okay. Question.
Make it short.
This is a very important one. I think this is something that we must ask you. What do you think of Elon Musk's breakdown sort of scenarios in public as a founder? We all understand that there are very hard decisions that the founders have to make, and their lives can be, in pretty turmoil situations. But there's what is, you've experienced it really well, and you've also had your share of, controversial things. Okay, can that be shared publicly, or should it be very private? And for you, I think there were two amazing women in your life. There was this mother who was connected to the business, and you had this amazing wife at home. A person like Elon Musk, two wives have left him, or he kicked them out, and the guy is looking for a date in public media. I mean, how would CEOs, top-rated CEOs resolve this kind of stuff? I mean, it's somewhat personal, but I think you're a great person to.
So I'll just say that I don't know Elon personally or professionally. I don't study sort of startup celebrity culture well enough to know all the things that have happened. I've heard, obviously, through the grapevine. I think my rough overview is consistency is really awesome and important. So if you are speaking out about this stuff and being transparent, like when you are feeling hurt, but not when other people are feeling hurt, that's kind of shitty. I don't love that, right? I think that you should have, if you're having empathy for yourself, you need to have it for other people too. And I would love to see that equality from all sorts of startup leaders. And like I said, I don't know Elon well enough to say for certain, but my sense is he's ridden the tech bro toboggan pretty far down the path.
The what toboggan?
Tech bro toboggan.
The tech bro toboggan.
Yeah,
I like that. That's a tweetable moment. Tech bro toboggan. He's ridden too far. Probably too far.
even he probably knows he's ridden too far.
And people founders are saying, can we do that? That's unfair.
I think that women are forced to uphold an impossible standard in this field and in every professional field, for sure. It's not reasonable at all. And then guys like Elon are lauded for you cried in public and displayed your emotions, and it's sort of like, what the hell? This double standard sucks. We got to end that. Yeah.
And we're making progress to that.
Oh, it's so slow.
So, yeah.
Yes. Let's get better.
Want to do some of those books?
Oh yeah, let's. I do have a couple books. I have to run, but I do have a couple of books. And so what I'm going to do is, Marta, are you still here?
Marta?
Yes. Oh, excellent. Yes. Would you do me a favor and distribute these to some of the folks who asked excellent questions? Can I put you in charge of that? Oh, okay. All right.
If you point out who they were.
Sure.
I'm
Excellent questions.
outsourcing this to.
I would say excellent questions.
Oh, there's a lot of pointing. Yes. Okay.
Going
Yes.
to the stripes?
Yeah, that's right.
Point to the other person.
Who's the other point to ask the question?
All the way to the back.
Oh, row all the way back. Row all the way back.
Two females.
Awesome.
Awesome. Love that. Well, thank you for being here.
This was awesome.
You're awesome.
You're
You're awesome.